So you're welcome to Transform Gov, where we explore the digital transformation in the public sector. And I am your host, Maeve Neefsey. So this week, we're diving into an incredible insight into AI in the public sector. And this is part two of, well, don't miss part one. This is part two of an interview with Professor Vinny Wade, who's the Professor of Computer Science and the Senior Lecturer at Trinity College Dublin and co-founder of Adapt SFI Research Centre. So in our last interview, part one, we covered a pretty broad range of different topics, particularly what is AI? Why is it happening now? How can we use it? How is it being used? And we also even talked about how AI can be helping deal with social isolation, which is really interesting. So don't miss part one. So part two, we're kind of moving into different areas. And I suppose one of the things we didn't touch on is early adopters. So who are the early adopters of AI?
So AI is, and particularly GenAI, is the early adopters had been the IT companies or the tech companies themselves. And what we're seeing them in GenAI hitting every department within an organization, though. So we're seeing it obviously in those departments which are content generators in general. So things like marketing and sales would be, the departments which would be straight away using it. We're seeing anything to do with customer experience. That could be from e-government right the way through to commercial companies, through to public sector companies. We're seeing it in any software development. People are forgetting that actually GenAI because it can compose content, it can actually compose code. And
as long as it doesn't ruin any of or you don't put at risk your IP of your code, right?
No, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Right, sorry to distract you.
But it will generate code for you, and it'll generate a lot of the code. You can then kind of massage it into the system that you want. But it's now becoming a very well used tool, and we're seeing actually software development teams shrinking because they're using GenAI to actually generate parts of the code. So we're seeing it across all of those areas, but then we're seeing it into pharmaceutical. We're seeing it in the chemical industry. We're seeing it in governments.
I can't let you carry on without asking a quick question around that. So because they're shrinking teams, is there a risk that people are going to be no longer employed, or particularly highly well-paid programmers, or what do you see happening?
Oh, okay. So I get this question a lot. Mm-hmm. The truth of the matter is that there is a small shrinkage in the beginning, but then in order to accommodate GenAI, roles change. And it's those roles. So I always give the example of there are certain jobs which we don't think about being around, and it's quite happy with them. So secretarial pools you never see.
The guy feeding the fuel into the furnace of the train.
Yeah, the guy filling your tank for you, whatever it might be. So roles change. It doesn't mean that people, generally speaking, are going to be a lot of unemployment. What happens is as roles become changed, people move up the chain. And so what we're seeing now is, although there was an initial, we don't need as many programmers, we're now seeing actually we need a lot of people who actually understand GenAI, and we understand how to use this, and the training of it and all of that. So it actually creates jobs as much as...
So people have to evolve, I presume.
Absolutely. And what's happening is, I always say to people is, GenAI is unlikely to take your job, but somebody using GenAI might.
Okay.
And that's, if you think of it that way. So it becomes a skill that we need to be able to have within our jobs to allow us to do them better. And also we tend to then change the way we do our job slightly. Whether it be, I don't have to attack a blank page anymore if I'm writing an essay. I might use GenAI to generate certain parts or topics that I might then use as background research, and then I write my article. But it helps me think about the structure of that. It helps me compose it or reply or whatever it might be. So GenAI, the skills around GenAI and being GenAI aware, GenAI literate will become very,
so
very
the
key.
Junior lawyers who were sent off to go and look up the case studies to come up with the references for some argument they're putting forward, they won't be needed to do that, but they will be trying to use the AI solution tools to do the work.
Exactly. They will be using that to do, and they will become much more productive because they're not having to do the low level stuff. They can add. GenAI is so different to a lot of other AI automation in the sense that it is actually focused on the knowledge worker. Mm-hmm. So it is actually taking some of the responsibilities of the knowledge worker. But what happens is the knowledge worker is still needed, in other parts of that process.
Okay, I distracted you. Carry on.
No.
So we were talking about the tech companies, early adopters, pharma.
Pharma is becoming an early adopter. Pharma, actually, some of them are actually looking at GenAI to generate potential streams of research. So it says, okay, if I have all of these and I want to, which would be the most appropriate to examine? And it took a whole wide selection that you would never put people on, and it generates a smaller number of these could be potential, and then the company works on that.
So this is some sort of potential drug, or
potential drug could be potential looking at different reactions and maybe different parts of the drug development process. What we're seeing is that GenAI is now a part of R&D. GenAI is now part of product development, and think of it as a co-generator of ideas, a sounding board, and so forth.
Is AI, creative and imaginative if it's coming up with ideas?
So lots of philosophical debates about this one. We have seen GenAI generate music. We've seen GenAI generate images and based on requirements and so forth. Is it really creative? Is it just derivative? There's different schools of thought. It's certainly, if you think of creation is development of something that wasn't there before, then it's creative. But is it as creative as some artists? No. But again, artists are using it as another tool to stimulate their imagination and then co-creating. So again, those lines are becoming a little more blurred as well.
I won't go into it because we could go there forever. But I do know somebody who was organising an event in their local area,
right? And
the designer used AI to generate the poster, and they said, "Oh, that's just an AI poster." So I think we'll begin to be able to recognise things as well. But look, who knows? It might evolve. But anyway, sorry, we were talking about early adopters.
So the early adopters, we're seeing a lot of companies. E-government has been one of the slower adopters, and now one can understand that because of risks. Within a government, you've got to be careful about ethics. You've got to be ethical. What is the legislation and so forth. So with e-government, what's happening, we've seen is a lot of employees within public service are using them for this personal productivity. And what's happening is a number of governments are actually putting out certain behaviours. So they're saying, look, okay, if you're going to use this as a great tool, however, be careful of these. You've got to understand this. You've got to understand hallucination. You've got to understand you can't be giving away information and so forth. You asked a question about in software, you certainly do not upload your program and ask ChatGPT or something to debug it. If that is your copyright. Yeah, exactly. Because now, again, the companies themselves, the vendors, are coming back and saying, well, actually, we can sign contracts where we guarantee we will not use any information you get for training purposes. We'll just use it for you. And there's, people are beginning to, put the legals around that. But this is still an evolving space.
And what about Japan and China? I've been reading a lot about them and their whole attitude to AI. Is it very different what's going on there?
It's evolving. I mean, what's happening is that Europe took the step forward and it said, look, we in similar fashion to the way we took a step forward in GDPR, in personal information. And effectively, a lot of countries around the world began to take parts of it and then begin to move forward and so forth. So Europe was very concerned that somebody needs to take a step forward in this, and it was the EU that brought out, began to look at what trustworthy AI could be, and then look at the guidelines and eventually with the AI Act, which is now signed and which will become legally operative over the next 6-9 months.
Wow, okay, so soon.
So soon. And it is part of, people think that industry didn't want this regulation. Well, industry wanted regulation because they needed some guide rails, even for them, because otherwise, how is it the Wild West? If there's no rules, then I can't be protected either when I'm a company, kind of thing. So with Europe, we took a step forward. It's still having a dialogue with China and Japan and with the US in terms of globally we need to align some of these rules and so forth. And the countries are evolving. But it's the advantage from a Europe perspective is at least we have some clarity now. And it's for the companies who are operating globally, if they want to operate in Europe, they know they have to conform to this. So what happens is, well, actually, maybe we conform to this in a broader sense. China's slightly different. It doesn't have those responsibilities. They're very focused very much on making sure AI doesn't harm the state.
That's their priority.
And they don't have the same copyright laws that we would have. And one thinks in terms of the way in which even social media and so forth is managed in places like China. It's very, very different. So within Europe, we kind of took a risk-based approach. So we've taken an approach which says, okay, high risk, very high risk, you're just not going to allow to use it.
So where are the areas that the Act think are high risk that we have to be really careful with?
Well, where you have any life-threatening or governmental decision-making that's being automated by AI.
Okay, so we're not going to let AI make decisions in certain areas.
In certain areas without human supervision and key infrastructures and so forth at a very high level. But in health, what's the next level down is kind of like saying, okay, if I'm in healthcare, in the same way that I have to have healthcare regulation for drugs and so forth, I have to do it if I'm going to use AI making decisions in your health. So what that means is certification and regulation will be done by healthcare regulator. Mm-hmm. If you're in transport, it'll be done by the transport regulator. If you're in education, it's done by whoever the educational regulator is. So the result is they have this situation where they've devolving the regulation of it and putting in certain concerns about, okay, if it's for education, for example, a very simple one. In education, if I'm using automated assessment of students, then that needs to be overseen by humans, because there's a danger there. You could bring in bias and so forth.
And they've had cases of that, haven't they, where there was some kind of assessment of students using AI, and or maybe they're testing it and they got it wrong or it was imbalanced. I can see it happening anyway.
I'm not
that way.
But it could happen. So that's why we're being very careful in that space. We've seen it in legal injustice where AI systems were trained on a particular jurisdiction, and of course, because of the population bias in that and judgment bias in that jurisdiction, when they started applying it in other jurisdictions, the bias became very, very clear.
Okay.
And so in those situations, you want to be careful. So that's why you have to have that regulation in place. With government, because the government is seen as part of the state, and is the state, the regulations are in place for those. So they would be regulated, and different aspects would be regulated.
So it's good news that we're going to have the AI Act in terms of giving a framework.
Exactly.
But for example, what governments are quite far ahead that we should be looking to, perhaps, in terms of what we're going to do with AI within the public sector?
Well, in terms of if you look globally, different government agencies have moved differently. So in the UK, they've produced a number of documents now in terms of how they wanted employees of public services to think about AI, what they need to be concerned about, what the practices are, and so forth. And they're beginning to come out with those already, and they're beginning to have preferred service providers for particular things, and so forth. In the US, it's slightly more federate, so it's individual states looking at it and so forth, but with some governmental. I think in Ireland, we could move faster. Mm-hmm. I think in Ireland, we do have the ability in terms of our population to be able to make better use of it. I think it needs to be rolled out in a more organized way, and I think that the services could be majorly improved with GenAI, but it has to be done properly. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that, and I think that everyone understands that, but we do have to move in it. And what does happen, and sometimes is the companies, the employees are quite willing to use it, but the companies are kind of going, or the organizations are kind of going, oh, well, hang on, there's so many risks, and they're looking at the risks all the time, and they're kind of going, okay, well, look at the benefits and risks, and it's about that.
Balance that out. Look, I have to say it, we're having our summit, our leadership summit on the 19th of September, and our topics are AI and cybersecurity. So there'll be loads of debate around this, which is good. Because
which is very good.
You have to have the debate to move forward. Yep. But I suppose by nature of being a public organization, they tend to look at the risks first, but I think there needs to be some movement to balance it out and take advantage of it as well.
I think it is. I mean, remember, our human brains are conditioned where we focus on risk. We always look at the bad news. We always look at if you look at the newspapers, they'll always believe the bad news because they know it captures your attention. It's the way we're hardwired. But on the other hand, we've got to look at the benefits, and we've got to look at how we actually do this right, and how we kind of weigh up both sides. And there is good practice out there, and there is smart people out there, and there is a willingness to say, actually, this could help. This could take away some of the drudgery, some of the the routine, but also help in the situations where there's an obstacle, a bit of a bump, and how do I actually get out to solve this problem? I have this tool that can help me and work around it. Those things. The other part that GenAI is actually very good at is sharing knowledge between people within the organization, because it can connect, say, well, actually also, this is available here, this is available here, making people aware of resources that they wouldn't necessarily be aware of in a large organization. We always assume that people in large organizations...
It's such a pain trying to find information in large organizations, no matter how good the system is.
Yeah.
So if anything that can help with that, and that you can ask questions of it and frame it.
Exactly. And create a dialogue with it. Say, okay, well, no, but this is what I'm reeling, but I'm for this, and then you get the answers.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of ways in which GenAI can really accelerate people's
So when you
working.
look maybe 5 years ahead, right? What do you think, what shape is society in, particularly around government and its use of AI? What do you think is going to be the norm?
Well, the Adapt Centre, that is one of the things that we're actually focused on.
So just tell us a bit about the Adapt Centre, actually.
So the Adapt Centre is the AI Centre, National AI Research Centre, focusing on human-centric AI. So unlike just looking at data science, what we've always focused on how it affects the human, how the human can be empowered, and we focus on the empowerment. So what that means is every time we look at AI, we always think in terms of how can that really help a human? How can that actually really empower them, whether it be social, work, leisure, entertainment, whatever it might be. And we work both with government, but we also work with industry. So we work with lots of different industries who are trying to use AI, GenAI, and other forms of AI to actually really have an impact. Now, in terms of where that means and where the centre's focused, we are trying to build, if you like, a more balanced society. So we end up saying, no, just because you can automate it doesn't make it the best thing to do. And I don't mean that because of trying to keep a human particular activity. It's more the fact that actually just automating isn't actually what necessarily produces a better solution. Where the human becomes an appendage to an automated system and knows when things are going wrong but can't do anything about it. What we kind of look at is how we can actually create a situation where humans are actually being empowered and can empower the systems in both ways. That actually means you take an interdisciplinary approach. So within the Adapt Centre, we would have the top academics in terms of AI and science and data science and so forth. But we also have people from human-computer interaction. We have people from ethics, sociology, law, people from psychology.
So what do you
working
see
with us
coming down the track as the output of all those efforts? I mean, not just Adapt, but generally in society.
I think what we find is the kind of solutions that people want are ones which are participatory, ones which the humans can have an input into and can shape. What if you go just from the automated, it's automated for that particular activity, and the humans kind of like a side. At the end of the day, it's about automating. Exactly. So whereas if the human is part of it, actually you end up with a much better solution. So you can co-create things. You can co-design things with the systems. They can imbue it with, but this is the direction we want it to go. That means that technology has to be much more shapeable by the human, which is kind of not always the way it's been done.
Are we thinking, I'm making things up, I have no idea, but look, we think, for example, somebody saying, okay, listen, this week I'm definitely on a health kick, and I'm gonna be doing far more weightlifting. Okay, right. So can you please tell me exactly what I should order in the supermarket? I mean, what are we talking about? What practical applications do you think will come down the track? I mean, when we talked in the first part of the interview, we spoke about AI in preventing social isolation, right?
That's just one. So for example, let's take the health, the wellness side of things. If you think of it just functionally, tell me what I should be eating. It's not really what your goal is. Your goal is you want to feel well, you want to feel energized or whatever. So having that dialogue with the system, which begins to know more about you and you about what it is, it actually educates you as well as affects your diet plan, as well as, so it becomes your training buddy or your healthcare buddy, so that you can actually then move forward. So it's no longer just you trying to find out the little slivers of behaviors that hopefully will be the magic bullet to make you really stronger or really fitter or whatever. but to actually think of it, the experience as being more holistic, and say, well, actually, there's a whole series of behavioural changes. Like so first and foremost, is, it can tell that you're very sedentary. So which means that you're not
sit
moving
around
enough.
a lot.
I don't know. But sitting here in this positive.
Actually, this is relevant to a conversation we had with Barry Lowry in our earlier interview, and he was talking about trying to really work around life stages for people, that the government needs to centre itself around that.
Yes.
But I would think that AI could play a really big role in that.
Absolutely.
Where do you think that's a possibility?
And that's what I mean about more human-centric. But it's even coming close to that and more personalised. So we can actually do it just for you.
Okay.
Rather than just
not
the
just
generic.
the person getting married or experiencing a loss of somebody as a death. That's a life experience, but actually how you particularly might be affected.
Yes, exactly. Or not just about a certain stage in someone's life, but actually you in that stage with whatever abilities, disabilities, and preferences have, and then try and lead you through and help you, because it becomes a whole negotiated. You have the shape. You can shape this. Whereas these point solutions where we kind of say, well, look, take this bullet, take this tablet, and that will solve your problem. And then we find that it doesn't actually solve the problem.
No.
So all of those ones, we have a much more holistic solution. Now, that can be very broad, or wellness, whatever, or that can be quite specific in terms of, let's say, entertainment. Suggesting activities you might do on the weekend. It might be to do with if in your work, how you actually structure documents, how you manage meetings, or how you prepare for meetings. So there's loads of different ways you can use these kind of coaching tools and so forth. There's loads of different ways that one can use a system to really empower you. Second thing is, it still is very good at analyzing things. So it can still analyze your behavior. It can still analyze all of those things to give you suggestions. Patterns.
I presume if on your financial information, all the stuff we don't want to know, like, you're spending far too much on, I don't know, apples. But it can really understand you in a very quick way.
Yes, absolutely. You can spot those. Again, just don't upload your financial details to a general purpose one, but one which what we're going to see now is more and more purpose-driven AI for particular aspects. So whether it be I'm worried about most people don't understand is pensions, for example, and have that dialogue, and have everyone has slightly different considerations, and it can actually go through that with you rather than... So
your peculiarities are going to be catered to, or answered, or responded to.
But then that makes you much more... I mean, I've been studying personalization for 20 years. And one of the things we notice about it is it becomes yours. And that means that you get a lot more out of it, as distinct from, okay, here's the standard solution, here's the boilerplate. And it doesn't really, it doesn't really affect you in the same way. And So I think what we're seeing is a more AI in a more balanced way.
Okay.
Don't get overexcited about automating everything, because that actually isn't the solution. On the other hand, we've got to form AI and shape AI to suit us. And I think that's the biggest way in which certainly the AI research in ADAPT has moved, and we've been pushing this for the last 6-7 years. So it's not new to us, but new to some others, where think of in terms of the human and then the AI, not think of just, well, here's another smart algorithm. Because yet another algorithm is not going to solve the problem. We need to think of it in a broader way.
Well, I can't leave this. I could talk about this for hours, by the way, but I have to talk to you about digital sovereignty.
Okay.
Because, this is a big issue, isn't it? So talk to us about that.
So the concerns are that as AI becomes more and more embedded in our society and embedded in our usage, it's becomes something that we become very reliant on. No entity, let's say the EU rather than just an individual country, wants to be beholden to a whole different state for something that's so intrinsic. So the concerns is that, well, actually, we need to develop AI technology that is fit for Europe, but also is based in Europe, versus based in other countries and reliant on them. Now, they're all global companies and so forth, but we have to think in terms of, okay, well, look, how does this actually play out in a global perspective? And Europe can't be left behind in terms of AI. We have fantastic technology, we have fantastic research in the space. How do we actually ensure that that actually comes through, gets used, and then get replenished? Because, you know, what's happening more and more in research, for example, is there's less and less money going into research, which is a bit of a problem because then all the actual developments have been done by companies. And what we need to have is broader shared research. And that's where the EU funding for research and the Irish government, when it does fund research, becomes really, really important. So sovereignty means that you have the ability not to be reliant on so many other countries. It doesn't mean you just have to use your own, but you have to have that baseline.
Safeguards, I presume.
And safeguards, absolutely.
Okay.
Then the regulation is the second part of that, then to say, okay, well, look, if you're going to be selling within our jurisdiction, you know, we value the following. Therefore, you must conform to
our
and appreciate the risks and appreciate the regulation that we insist upon.
So, if you were in an organization, you're looking and you're trying to explore AI, and you know the act is coming.
Yep.
What would you do? What would you do first, or how would you kind of inform yourself? Would you hire somebody particularly within the organization who's an AI expert, or would you get somebody else in to help you? Or what way would you approach it?
So it depends on the situation. So first and foremost, what we're seeing is there's an awful lot of bottom up going on at the moment, where say individuals are just using it, right? And what happens then is at the top end, the head of IT or the head of CIO, whatever, kind of goes, okay, hang on, we need to have a strategy around this. And as you begin to build a strategy, you kind of say, okay, well, look, what are the places where this could really have a big impact? There's a lot written out there. There's a lot of expertise out there. I mean, the DAP Centre, we work with all organisations and governments in terms of what the capabilities are. And we're the honest broker in this industry because we're not actually trying to sell our technology.
Yeah.
What we're doing is saying we're looking at the future. So I think that the first case is beginning to understand that and beginning to understand where in your organisation it might be the most apply. You wouldn't apply it across the organisation. What you do is you focus on one or two areas which you think will have a significant impact. Then you look for case studies and pilots and so forth. Then you're also looking at, okay, so what expertise do I need to do this? At the higher level, strategy-wise, but at the lower level in terms of, okay, how do we implement this and who's going to be our partners? It's very unlikely that most organizations are going to build their own foundation model. 100 million to develop. But what they will have is a strategy of whether or not we will take an open source model, train it ourselves. Is that the most appropriate? It depends on the size of the company. If you're a small company, you probably won't do it that way. If you're a medium-sized company, you'll consider it or use commercial services. So different people are doing it in different ways. Also, we're seeing for particular usages of GenAI. So, for example, if you're using GenAI for software development, a lot of people are using Copilot and other specialized software development which have GenAI built in.
Mm-hmm.
For customer care, some people are buying platforms which have a GenAI built in. To support that. Again, you need to be careful in terms of, okay, well, what my customer information, where does it go? I certainly don't want anyone training on it and so forth. And so what we're seeing is there's either the generic GenAI solution for all my departments or specific ones that are shaped for the particular functionality or problem or department that I'm looking at. Mm-hmm. And that's how the thing is evolving. So whereas at the moment we have quite a number of the big players, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Apple with GenAI solutions. What we're seeing the next generation is vertical markets embedding GenAI into their products and providing solutions enhanced with GenAI. Whether it be in education, whether it be in customer care, whether it be in HR.
I think we're going to have to come back to the subject. What do you think?
Okay, no problem.
There is so much we could talk about, but that was fantastically insightful and gave us a really good feeling for what's going on out there and then what's available. And I thank you so much for being our guest. We really enjoyed it. You are a transformer, which is why you're on Transform Gov. So thank you so much. And I want to thank you, but also to thank our producer, Conala Moran, studio manager, Peter Rice, our engineers today are Lee Brennan and Luke Delaney. And thank you to South Dublin Podcast Studio. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Maeve.